Stop scrolling, stop whatever you were about to do in the next 10 seconds. Because something has happened to Meghan Markle in the past 7 years that the wider press is now, in plain terms, finally prepared to describe. The Hollywood A-list has left the chapel, not metaphorically, literally. The same celebrity power players who flew into Windsor in 2018 for what was, at the time, billed as the wedding of the decade have, almost without exception, quietly disengaged from the household they once celebrated. The wedding photographs from that day now read as the snapshot of a network that no longer functions. Picture the original list. Oprah Winfrey in the pew, smiling for the cameras, George and Amal Clooney arriving together at the height of their global star power, Serena Williams seated with her husband, one of the few American friends Meghan had brought with her from her pre-royal life. James Corden, the warm British host, on hand to run the wedding speeches with the lightness only he could provide. Idris Elba at the disc jockey booth for the evening reception. David and Victoria Beckham, Sir Elton John, performing for the assembled guests. The kind of guest list, in short, that ordinary celebrities can only ever dream of being on. Brought to a chapel in the English countryside by the marriage of the Queen's grandson to an American actress. 7 years on, almost every single name on that list has, in the language of the celebrity ecosystem, walked away. Some have stepped quietly back, some have actively pivoted toward the working royals, some are now described by people in a position to know as wanting nothing to do with the couple at all. Tonight, we are walking through the entire list, name by name, story by story. And the picture that comes out the other end is the cleanest possible explanation of why this past month has felt the way it has felt for the Sussex household. The empty Geneva Square, the wedding anniversary tribute that drew silence, the Montecito kitchen that has become a financial signal, none of it makes sense on its own. All of it makes sense once you understand what has happened to the chapel guest list. Tonight, in order. Oprah Winfrey and the line that has now traveled across royal commentary about why the relationship is being kept on in the published phrase, a hair's breadth. The Clooneys and the very specific reason the Sussexes have never been invited to the most prestigious humanitarian fundraiser in the Clooney social calendar. Serena Williams, the friend who first opened the door into Hollywood, whose social calendar has now visibly pivoted toward the people Meghan has fallen out with. Idris Elba, who took the disc jockey booth at the wedding, and who is now in development on a Netflix project anchored to the king's own charity. The Beckhams and the genuinely revealing story of why David flew his sons halfway around the world for an Invictus visit and was then, in plain terms, snubbed. Jessica Mulroney, the chief friend at the wedding itself, whose entire career imploded in 2021 without a single supportive public word from the woman she had stood beside at Windsor. So settle in, pour something strong. This is the kind of week the gossip world waits years for. Let us start with Oprah Winfrey, because Oprah is the single most consequential name on the original list. And because the reporting on the current state of that relationship is the cleanest piece of celebrity gossip published in the royal commentary world this year. Oprah Winfrey was, on its face, the single most important new American ally the Sussex household acquired in the entire post-royal period. The 2021 interview at her Montecito estate generated a global news cycle. It triggered the Heritage Foundation interest in Harry's United States immigration records that we have covered in earlier scripts. It triggered the Kensington Palace bullying inquiry that was announced days before it aired. It generated in the immediate moment the impression that the most powerful single woman in American broadcasting was now publicly behind the post-royal mission. 7 years on, the picture is rather different. Meghan has, in the years since, attended events at Oprah's home. The relationship has not been formally ended, but the two are no longer, in plain terms, close. The reporting on the current state of the friendship uses a careful phrase that has now traveled across royal commentary. The relationship, by every available signal, is being kept on a hair's breadth. A hair's breadth is the gap between connection and rupture. It is the description of a friendship that has not ended but is no longer flourishing. And here is the explanation that has now landed in print. Attributed to a credentialed American journalist whose palace and celebrity sourcing has been one of the most consistent presences across the entire Sussex story this year. Oprah, in this published account, has been long-arming the Sussexes for some time. The reasoning is brutally cold, but in the cold logic of major American broadcasting, accurate. Oprah cannot allow the relationship to drift too far away. Because if something happens in the published phrase, one of the three big Ds, divorce, death, or drama, Oprah will want the interview. She will want first refusal on the next significant Sussex moment, whatever that moment turns out to be. So the relationship is, in operational terms, kept on a low simmer, not warm enough to be a real friendship, not cold enough to lose the option on the next big sit-down. That is the relationship in plain language. The bottom line is that Oprah likes people primarily when they have something to offer her. And the implicit observation in the wider piece is the recognizable irony of two of the most criticized public figures in modern celebrity history being kept in another celebrity's orbit, precisely because their probable future crises have commercial value to a broadcaster who cannot afford to lose the rights to cover them. It is worth pausing on the wider implication because it explains a great deal about how the Sussex household has been allowed to drift this far without an early and decisive intervention from the people who originally surrounded it. The model of celebrity friendship that Hollywood operates on is one in which the warm signaling continues for as long as the underlying commercial calculation continues to make sense. Friends host the dinner. Friends share the jet. Friends post the supportive caption. The friendship continues to be performed for the cameras because performing the friendship has value to everybody involved. The moment the commercial value of the proximity flips the other way, the friendship loses its visible support without ever being formally ended. The friend stops returning the call quite as quickly. The friend declines the next invitation with a reason that sounds plausible. The friend posts about other people on the social platforms. The friend, in the social phrase, long arms the relationship. That is the precise pattern at the heart of the Oprah-Sussex dynamic right now. And, as we will see over the next several chapters, it is the same pattern at the heart of the wider Hollywood pullback. There is also a wider observation worth making about Oprah's own situation that has rarely been made out loud in royal commentary. Oprah Winfrey is one of the most carefully managed personal brands in the entire American media ecosystem. Every relationship she maintains in public is, by every available reading of her own decades of business practice, run through a commercial filter as a matter of professional discipline. Friendships are valuable to her business. Friendships also carry reputational risk to her business. The same calculation that brought her to Windsor in 2018 for what was, at the time, the global wedding of the year, is the calculation that is now keeping her, in plain terms, on a hair's breadth, rather than at the center of the Sussex orbit. The calculation has not changed. The inputs to the calculation have changed. The Sussex household is no longer worth what it was worth in 2018. The Sussex household may, however, become worth a great deal, once again, at the moment one of the three Ds eventually arrives. So the option is preserved, the warmth is not. That is, in cold operational terms, the difference between a friendship and a portfolio position. The Sussex household is, by every available signal of Oprah's current behavior, a portfolio position. Now to Serena Williams. And this one is, in some ways, the most quietly painful of all the reported relationships, because Serena is the original friend. The friend who introduced Meghan to her first major Hollywood agent in 2006, when Meghan was an unknown actress writing her early blog called The Tig. The friend at the center of the original American support system that brought Meghan into the Hollywood circuit in the first place. The framing of the current state of the relationship uses the single most damning word any celebrity friendship reporting can use. Serena is, in the published phrase, fine with the couple. Fine. In the entire vocabulary of celebrity friendship reporting, fine is the temperature of a relationship that no longer carries warmth. Fine is what you say when you cannot, in good conscience, claim closeness, but you also cannot, in public, claim rupture. Fine is the holding language of a friendship that has, in operational terms, ended without anyone formally announcing the ending. The reported reasoning goes further. Serena Williams has, in the published account, put distance between herself and Meghan because, in her own apparent framing, she is not a drama queen and has tired of the surrounding noise. The reporting then drops in the single most pointed piece of social geometry in the entire chapter. Serena's new closest friend, in the published reporting, is the socialite Emma Thin, the Marchioness of Bath. Serena posted from the recent Met Gala alongside the Marchioness, and in the same images, alongside Edward Enninful, the former editor of British Vogue and a former close friend of Meghan's now widely reported to be estranged from her. That is not a casual social photograph. That is a celebrity pivot. The new best friend slot in Serena Williams' social circle has been filled openly by a woman who is, in social terms, on the opposite side of the Sussex story. The two former close associates Meghan has fallen out with, the Marchioness of Bath and Edward Enninful, have both ended up in the same Met Gala frame as Serena. The audience watching that photograph and reading those tags is not, by any honest measurement, being asked to interpret a coincidence. It is being shown in clean visual language where the loyalties have settled. It is worth recording the specific texture of the social pivot Serena Williams has made, because the people she has now chosen to align herself with publicly are the most precise possible countersignal she could have delivered. The Marchioness of Bath is a member of the British aristocracy by marriage and a frequent presence in the same high-end social circuit Meghan had originally tried to occupy. Edward Enninful is one of the most powerful figures in international fashion media, was a personal close friend of Meghan's during her early royal years, and has fallen out with her in the period since. By choosing to publish images of herself at the Met Gala alongside both of these women, Serena was not, in any honest reading, making a neutral choice. She was performing a deliberate visual statement about where her loyalties now sit. The audience for that statement was the wider celebrity community. The signal received was clear. And there is one more piece of context that lands the Serena story particularly hard right now. The recent As Ever brand unboxing video, the one we have covered in earlier scripts, in which Serena Williams attempted to read aloud the scent notes of Meghan's children-themed candles, struggled with the pronunciation, and admitted on camera that she does not particularly like chocolate while looking at a box of broken anniversary chocolates, was the visible last gasp of an old loyalty being asked to perform one more time. Serena did the unboxing. The unboxing went viral for the wrong reasons. And the recent Met Gala social geometry has now confirmed that the friendship is no longer where it used to be. Now to the Clooneys. Because the Clooney section of this story contains the single most quietly devastating piece of social analysis in the entire chapter. The Clooneys were, by every available reading of the early post-royal period, among the most active high-end supporters of the Sussex household. They live across 5 residences in New York, Los Angeles, London, France, and Italy. They reportedly made room for Meghan on their private jet for a number of journeys in the years after the royal departure. Serena Williams, on the same pattern of high-end gifting, reportedly picked up the bill at one of the most exclusive hotels in Lake Como for a Sussex visit. The wider source language on the underlying dynamic is unsparing. The Sussex household, in the assessment of one source close to the wider Clooney circle, ask for a lot of resources to be spent because they believe it is a privilege to be in their company. They think, in the source's framing, that they are entitled to the private planes and the high-end hotel rooms. And, in the parenthetical British phrase that has now appeared in print, the source describes Meghan personally as the cheapest. In British social parlance, that is not a description of price. It is a description of character. It is the language used about somebody who expects others to pay, who treats hospitality as a right rather than as a gift. The relationship with the Clooneys did not survive that operating mode. The friendship, in the published phrase, ended in the post-royal departure period. The Clooneys now want nothing to do with them. And here is the detail that lands the hardest. The Clooney Foundation hosts an annual humanitarian fundraiser called the Albies, named after Nelson Mandela, which honors individuals doing significant humanitarian work around the world. The Sussex household, who regard themselves as prominent international humanitarians, have never been invited to the Albies. They have never been awarded an Albie. They have never appeared at the event in any capacity. That, in the cold language of social signaling, is a deliberate exclusion. The single most prestigious humanitarian fundraiser hosted by the people who once shared private jets with Meghan has, year after year, declined to put the Sussexes on the guest list or on the honors roster. The social verdict is delivered every time another year goes by without the invitation arriving. There is one further line on the underlying dynamic that explains why the rupture became permanent. George and Amal Clooney, in the published commentary that has now appeared, were never really close friends with Meghan in the deeper sense. They had, in plain terms, very little genuinely in common with her, socially or politically. And, in the line that has now traveled, the Clooney side with the actual royals. That is the underlying judgment the Albie's non-invitation makes operationally clear. There is also a wider piece of cultural context worth noting on the Clooney pullback. George Clooney has spent the past 2 decades quietly building one of the most carefully maintained reputations in the entire American entertainment industry. Steady film career, serious humanitarian work. Considered public statements. A wife whose own legal and human rights work commands real respect. The Clooney brand, in operational terms, is the careful brand. The brand that does not, as a rule, allow itself to be associated with controversies it cannot fully control. So when the Clooney brand makes a decision to walk away from a friendship that is no longer adding value, the decision is not, by every available indication, a sentimental one. It is a clinical one. The brand calculation has been done, the answer has been delivered. The wider Clooney calendar speaks volumes too. In the same period during which the Sussex household has been absent from every meaningful Clooney social moment, George and Amal have continued to host their Italian summers at Lake Como, their fundraisers in Los Angeles, their charitable events in London and New York, and their annual humanitarian gathering, and the guest lists at all of those events have continued to draw the most prestigious names in American and European public life. The fact that the Sussex names have not appeared on any of those guest lists, despite the public claim of continuing humanitarian relevance from the Sussex side, is the kind of social fact the entire celebrity ecosystem reads as a verdict. The Clooneys are not, by any honest assessment, hostile to the Sussex household. They are simply behaving as if the Sussex household no longer exists for them in any operational sense. And in the cold language of high-end celebrity social calendars, that is the most devastating possible posture, because there is no public rupture to fight against. There is just absence. And absence cannot be argued with. There is one further point that lands the Clooney chapter particularly hard. Amal Clooney, by every available reading of her own public profile, is a serious international human rights lawyer with genuine credibility in the human rights advocacy world. Her work on cases involving press freedom, women's rights, and international atrocity has commanded real respect across institutional Europe and North America. The Sussex side has repeatedly attempted to position itself as a credible voice in adjacent areas: online safety, children's rights, mental health advocacy. Where the credible practitioner of those subjects sits in the Clooney household, the public face of the same subjects sits in the Sussex household. The audience watching the two operations side by side has, in slow motion, drawn its own conclusions about whose voice carries weight. And the Clooneys have, by every available signal, made very clear which voice they consider to be the credible one. Now to Idris Elba. And this one is genuinely interesting because Idris Elba is, by widely shared assessment across the British acting community, one of the more genuinely admired figures in the industry. He is also the man who, on the night of the wedding, took the disc jockey booth at the evening reception and ran the music for the dance floor. 7 years on, the relationship with the Sussex household has, in operational terms, ended. The reason is simple. Elba has become a prominent supporter of the King's Trust, the charity formerly known as the Prince's Trust, which is one of the working royal family's signature philanthropic operations. He has a Netflix project in development in association with the King's Trust ecosystem. He has made his choice, and the choice, by every available signal, is the working royals. There is a wider pattern in that decision worth pausing on. Across the entire Hollywood pullback, the celebrities who have stepped back from the Sussex orbit are not, in the main, people who have made noisy public statements about the rupture. They have instead quietly pivoted toward institutional engagement with the working royal family. The King's Trust appearances, the Chelsea Garden Show photographs alongside the King, the state visit guest lists, the patient, unshowy charitable work that the working royal family has continued to do across the post-royal years. The pattern is not, in the main, anger. It is reorientation. The celebrities who have walked away from the Sussex household are, by every available signal, walking towards something else. And the something else, in nearly every case, is the institutional structure the Sussexes left behind. Now to the Beckhams. And this is the chapter to spend a few extra minutes on, because the underlying detail is genuinely revealing about the deeper dynamic at the heart of the wider social collapse. David and Victoria Beckham were, by every available account, among the closest Hollywood-adjacent friends in the original Sussex social circle. At some point in the immediate post-royal period, the friendship cooled significantly. The reasoning, drawn from sources with knowledge of the rupture, attributes part of the breakdown to a suspicion within the Sussex household that Victoria Beckham was, in some way, leaking information to the British press. That suspicion enraged David Beckham personally. Victoria Beckham, by every available indication in the wider reporting, was not the source of the leaks. The accusation, however, was made. And the accusation, once made, was not, in the social shorthand of close Hollywood friendships, recoverable. But it is the wider biographical reporting that adds the genuinely consequential layer. David Beckham flew himself and his sons halfway around the world to Sydney to support Harry at the Invictus Games. The visit was, in the planning, expected to involve a personal meeting with Harry himself. No such meeting took place. The Beckhams were, in the social phrase, left waiting. The relationship on the back of that visible snub did not survive. This is the part of the story that complicates the simple narrative in which Meghan is presented as the sole cause of every Sussex social rupture. The Sydney snub, by the available reporting, was driven by Harry's own choices, not Meghan's. That is a notable observation from a biographer who has spent significant time inside the Harry circle and has been broadly sympathetic in earlier years to his side of various royal disputes. The pattern that has now been assembled is not a single dynamic driven by one half of the couple. It is a wider operating posture, shared by both, that treats long-established friendships as expendable the moment they cease to serve the immediate purposes of the brand. The contrast in the present day is sharp. David Beckham has now been visibly photographed alongside the King at the Chelsea Garden Show in recent weeks. He remains close to the Prince of Wales. He is, by every available signal, fully embedded in the working royal social ecosystem. The boy from East London, whose celebrity wattage made him the global ambassador of British sport for 2 decades, has chosen, in operational terms, to stand alongside the institution rather than alongside the household that walked away from it. And there is one further detail worth recording, because it captures the underlying social dynamic in a single observation. Among the very small number of people who remain genuinely close to the Sussex household are a Soho House global membership director, who was reportedly central to the early stages of the romance between Harry and Meghan and was placed in a front row pew at the wedding itself, and a Suits cast actress who has stayed in close contact in the years since. The wider category these remaining loyalists fall into is direct. The people who have stayed most loyal to the Sussex household, in the source language that has now appeared in print, are beneath them and get something out of the relationship in return. That is a hard line, even by the standard of celebrity friendship reporting. The framing is that the network has, in operational terms, hollowed itself out. The original A-list has departed. The people who remain are drawn from the layer of the celebrity ecosystem, where the proximity to the Sussex name continues to provide an upward social pull. The friendships that survive are the friendships in which the social trade is asymmetric. The friendships that have ended are the friendships in which both sides had, at the original wedding, something roughly equivalent to bring to the table. The Hollywood A-list does not, in the social grammar that has now been documented, do asymmetric trades for long. Now to Jessica Mulroney. This one is perhaps the cleanest case study in the wider pattern. Jessica Mulroney, the Canadian stylist and television personality, was, at the time of the wedding, one of Meghan's closest reported friends. She effectively served as the chief friend at the wedding itself, with a front of chapel roll and considerable public visibility on the day. In 2021, Mulroney was the subject of a significant public controversy following an argument with an American social media influencer, in which Mulroney was widely criticized for what was characterized as a misuse of her platform. Her Canadian television show was subsequently canceled. Meghan did not publicly defend her old friend. She did not make a supportive public statement. She did not, in the social grammar of close friendships, step into the breach for somebody she had only recently made the chief friend at her wedding. The friendship, by every available indication, ended at that point. The line that has now traveled comes from Meghan's former agent at the talent agency that represented her before the royal years. The observation in 3 words is that Meghan moves on. That is the entire characterization, 3 words. And those 3 words, in the social grammar of celebrity friendship reporting, are the most economical possible summary of a pattern that has now been documented across the entire wedding guest list. The Mulroney story carries a particular weight because of how complete the public abandonment was. The 2 women had, by every available account, been close for years before the wedding. Mulroney was, by widely shared reporting at the time, central to the early Meghan project in ways that went well beyond simple friendship. She advised on styling, she advised on positioning. She was reportedly involved in the early image management that helped make Meghan a recognizable figure in the Canadian press during the dating period. The placement of her at the wedding itself, with the high visibility role she occupied, was the public statement of the closeness of that bond. So, when the moment came in 2021 for the friendship to be tested, the watching public expected at least the gesture of solidarity that close friends, in the social grammar of the modern celebrity press, are expected to extend at moments like that. The gesture did not come. The silence held. And by the time the silence had stopped being notable, the friendship was, in plain terms, over. The audience reading the Mulroney chapter back now is not, by any honest reading, watching a difficult personal dispute play out in slow motion. The audience is watching a worked example of the operating principle. Old friend is no longer useful. Old friend has, in addition, become an active reputational liability. Old friend is therefore, in operational terms, no longer a friend. The pattern is not, by any honest reading, unique to Mulroney. The pattern is, by every available signal of the wider Hollywood pullback, the same pattern that has now repeated itself across the entire wedding guest list. Step back from the individual stories now and consider the wider judgment that the most senior royal commentary voices have now openly delivered. The wider social collapse is, by the most consistent published assessment, the predictable endpoint of an operating mode that treats every new relationship as a transactional one. The famous people were brought in because the proximity served the brand. The famous people are now leaving for the same operational reason. The proximity no longer serves the brand. In some cases, the proximity now actively damages it. The Hollywood ecosystem has, in the cold language of celebrity reputation management, weighed the cost-benefit and concluded that the safer position is at a distance. There is also a wider piece of analysis worth pausing on. The Sussex household does not, in operational terms, accept that the social collapse is its own responsibility. The narrative that has been carried throughout the post-royal years is that they are the targets of an external campaign of rejection. The narrative is consistent. The institution rejected them. The British press rejected them. The American press subsequently rejected them. The lifestyle brand customers, by their own implied framing, have failed to recognize the value of the products being offered. The Hollywood A-list, by the present moment, is now also being treated as the latest constituency to have failed them. The pattern never lands on the household itself. The pattern, in their telling, always lands on the people who have, by whatever route, ended up no longer in proximity. That is the framing that, by every available reading, makes the situation effectively unrecoverable. Because the operating mode that produced the social collapse cannot, in any operational sense, be reformed without the underlying premise being reformed. And the underlying premise, by every available indication, is not under any visible review. The household continues to operate exactly as it has operated for the past 5 years, the wedding anniversary post, the Geneva speech, the as ever launches, the brand merchandising attached to the late queen, attached to the founder's daughter, attached now to the wedding itself. The patterns are not changing. And the people who watch the patterns have, one by one, drawn the inevitable conclusion. This is also the underlying judgment that explains every other story this past month. The empty Geneva Square, the wedding anniversary tribute that landed in deafening A-list silence, the Daily Mail editorial split over the Project Thaw question, the Invictus financial picture, the Montecito kitchen that has become a financial signal. All of it sits inside the same wider story. The operating mode that the Sussex household has run since the original royal departure has now, by every available metric of the celebrity ecosystem that originally surrounded it, lost the friends the operating mode was built to retain. So this is the picture as we leave it. A wedding guest list that, by every available signal of the present-day celebrity ecosystem, has almost completely disengaged from the household it originally celebrated. Oprah Winfrey, kept on a hair's breadth by commercial calculation. The Clooneys, publicly distant and quietly absent from every social calendar that matters. Serena Williams, the original Hollywood friend, posting from the Met Gala alongside the women Meghan has fallen out with. Idris Elba, working on a Netflix project anchored to the King's trust. The Beckhams, photographed alongside the King at the Chelsea Garden show. Jessica Mulroney, the chief friend at the wedding itself, left to face the consequences of her own public moment without a visible defense from the woman she had stood beside at Windsor. And, hovering across the entire weekend, an unresolved professional standards investigation now underway at the Metropolitan Police into the protection architecture around the working royal family that the Sussex household walked away from in 2020. You cannot manufacture a community by inviting it to a wedding. You cannot retain a community by treating its members as resources to be drawn down. You cannot rebuild a community after it has, in slow motion, watched you treat the previous members the way the Sussex household has, by every honest reading, treated the people who once stood in the chapel at Windsor. Stay sharp, stay watching, because the story that began at a royal wedding 7 years ago is not over. It is, by every honest reading, only just entering the chapter that everybody else has been able to see coming for a very, very long time. The next press cycle will arrive within days. The underlying picture will only continue to clarify. The audience watching this story has now, by every available measure, seen enough to draw its own conclusions. I will see you very soon.